Okay, let's dig into this. For this deep dive, we're really going to unpack how our minds work, in ways that are often quite surprising and, frankly, sometimes lead us down the wrong path.
Exactly. We're drawing a lot from Daniel Kahneman's classic work, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's just foundational stuff.
It really is. We've gathered sources that highlight these surprising mechanics of how we think, how we make judgments, how we assess risk.
And even how we remember things,
Right.
which is fascinatingly flawed sometimes.
Right. So the mission here really is to get a handle on what Kahneman calls these two main systems in our thinking, System 1 and System 2.
Yeah, and to understand how those quick, intuitive shortcuts, System 1, mostly how they're great for efficiency, but also how they can create these like systematic errors, predictable mistakes,
Even when we think we're being careful.
especially then, sometimes.
So the goal isn't just listing biases, is it? It's understanding the kind of the engine behind them.
That's it, getting a clearer picture of your own mental wiring, why you think the way you do, and maybe spot where it might, trip you up occasionally.
Okay, so let's talk about these systems. System 1, that's the fast one.
Super fast, automatic, intuitive, always on. It generates impressions, feelings. It does it effortlessly. It's the part that knows instantly that something's cement. Sounds weird in a sentence.
Right, or that knows multiplying 17 by 24 is going to take some actual work.
Exactly. That feeling of, uh-oh, effort needed comes from System 1, assessing the task for System 2. It's your brain's rapid response unit.
And the thing is, System 1 is basically running the show most of the time, isn't it?
A surprising amount of the time, yeah. And it's brilliant at creating a coherent story from whatever information is right there, right in front of it. That's the WISI principle.
WYSIA, what you see is all there is. Love that acronym.
It's so descriptive. System 1 just grabs what's available and leaps to a conclusion. It doesn't stop to think, what info am I missing?
And because System 2, the slow, deliberate, effortful part you need for that 17 times 24 calculation, well, because it's often busy, or let's be honest, kind of lazy.
It often just goes along with System 1's story. It accepts the plausible narrative without really digging in and checking the work.
And that relationship, that interaction, System 1 proposes, System 2 kind of just nods.
Yeah.
And that's where so many of these biases creep in.
Absolutely. Take statistics. System 1 is notoriously bad with stats. The sources really point this out with our tendency to overtrust small samples, the so-called law of small numbers.
Ah, right. Seeing a cluster of, say, cancer cases in a tiny county or amazing test scores in a really small school.
And immediately thinking there must be a reason, a cause. We ignore that small samples just naturally have more extreme variation. It's just math. But System 1 wants a story.
Yeah, our intuition just fails us there. We hunt for cause and effect, even when it's just random noise, like that the taxi cab problem example.
Oh, the blue and green cabs. Classic. It shows how hard it is for us to use plain statistical base rates, unless we can somehow twist them into a causal story.
Which kind of links to the availability heuristic, doesn't it? Judging likelihood by how easily examples come to mind.
Exactly. Vivid stuff, things you've heard about recently or that were really dramatic. They feel more probable, even if statistically they're super rare.
And this gets amplified, right? Availability cascades.
Yeah, like those public scares, Love Canal, Alar on apples. The media coverage makes it constantly available in your mind, which fuels public worry way beyond the actual statistical risk. The surprising thing is your feeling of risk isn't based on data, but on ease of recall.
And tied into that is the affect heuristic, basically letting your feelings hijack your judgment.
Pretty much. How do I feel about this? Becomes the shortcut answer to what do I think about this? More often than we'd probably like to admit.
And these shortcuts, these emotional judgments, they mess with big decisions. Framing is a huge one from the sources.
Oh, definitely. Tell people a surgery has a 90% survival rate, they're keen. Tell them it has a 10% mortality rate, suddenly less keen, same outcome. Even doctors fall for it.
It's wild. And loss aversion, too, that feeling that losing, say, $100 hurts way more than gaining $100 feels good.
Which explains things like the endowment effect, why you value that old mug you own way more than someone else would pay for it. Losing it feels worse than the gain of money you'd get.
It's genuinely eye-opening how much our supposedly rational choices are swayed by these intuitive quirks.
And it feeds into things like overconfidence, the planning fallacy. We build these neat stories about why things happen, especially success, often giving too much credit to skill and ignoring luck.
The sources show that simple algorithms often beat expert judgment in predictions.
Consistently. because the algorithm isn't swayed by a compelling System 1 story. It just follows the data coldly and effectively.
Okay, so wrapping this up a bit, we've seen this interplay. Fast, intuitive System 1, efficient but prone to predictable errors.
Especially when the careful, effortful System 2 is, well, distracted or just doesn't engage.
And these biases affect basically everything: how you see data, judge risk, make forecasts, even how you look back on your own life.
Which brings us to maybe one of Kahneman's most profound points. The difference between the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Right. The experiencing self is living life moment by moment, feeling the pleasure or pain as it happens.
While the remembering self is the storyteller, it looks back, evaluates the whole thing later, and it uses weird rules like the peak end rule. It cares intensely about the most intense moment and the very end.
And kind of ignores how long the whole thing lasted, which is crazy.
It is crazy, like that coal hand experiment you mentioned earlier. People chose to repeat a longer period of pain just because the ending was slightly less painful. The memory was better, even if the experience overall was worse.
Because the remembering self writes the review, and that's what we consult for future decisions.
Precisely. It constructs the narrative we live with.
So here's something to really chew on then. If your remembering self is building these stories, focusing on peaks and ends, and largely ignoring duration, while your experiencing self lived through every single moment, how much of the happiness or regret you feel about your past is, an accurate reflection of the lived experience versus just a story your mind constructed using some pretty questionable rules?
Because those rules your memory uses, peak and duration neglect, they're actually poor guides for making future choices aimed at maximizing well-being. Time does matter in life, even if the remembering self often pretends it doesn't. Makes you think, doesn't it?